Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tadojjayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhatresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate Dharma Jnanadibhisaha Kalau Nashtadrshanesha Uranarko Dhunoditaha. I thought that we could
internet cut off. You should be joining. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram.
Krishna Naman Prabhu, he may not know you when you call him.
He joined. His Prabhu joined. Hare Krishna,
Oh, okay.
Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Sorry about somehow I think I dropped out for a while, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you probably didn't hear much of anything that I said, so I'll just start at the top.
Yes.
We're hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam. Kunti Maharani has spoken very nicely about Krishna's appearance in the 8th chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Beginning around text number 30, she's talking about Krishna Janmashtami, and she mentions the bewildering nature of the Lord's, not only the Lord's appearance, but his activities as well. You heard the Sanskrit verse or no?
Yes, Prabhu. But you can repeat, you can say at least one verse out of so many verses.
Yeah. We'll talk about a few verses, but I mentioned already Janma Karnama Chavishvatman Ajasya Karduratmanaha Tiryang Risi Suyatahasu Yet Tadatyanta Vedambanam. Of course, it is bewildering. O soul of the universe, she's addressing Krishna, that you work although you're inactive, and that you take birth although you're the vital force and the unborn. You yourself descend amongst the animals, men, sages, and aquatics. Verily, this is bewildering. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The transcendental pastimes of the Lord are not only bewildering, but also apparently contradictory. In other words, they're all inconceivable to the limited thinking power of the human being. The Lord is the all prevailing super soul of all existence, And yet he appears in the form of a boar amongst the animals, in the form of a human being, as Rama, Krishna, etc., in the form of a rishi like Narayan, and in the form of an aquatic like a fish. Yet it is said that he's unborn and he has nothing to do. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that the Supreme Brahman has nothing to do. No one is equal to or greater than him. He has manifold energies and everything is performed by him perfectly with automatic knowledge, strength, and activity. All these statements prove without any question that the Lord's activities, forms, and deeds are all inconceivable to our limited thinking power. And because he's inconceivably powerful, everything is possible in him. Therefore, no one can calculate him exactly. Every action of the Lord is bewildering to the common man. He cannot be understood by the Vedic knowledge, but he can be easily understood by the pure devotees, because they are intimately related with him. The devotees therefore know that although he appears among the animals, he's not an animal, nor a man, nor a rishi, nor a fish. He's eternally the Supreme Lord in all circumstances. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karudi Vachalam Pangum Lankhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yutaparakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahaganaragunatham Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganalalata Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lakshmi Nivasa Madhusudana Madhavatvam Deva Prasida Mama Buddhi Bharam Dadasva Yasmadaham Kila Vibho Tava Palakelim Samvarnayecha Satatam Pranipata Purvam. So, as we said, today is Krishna Janmashtami, and we've just heard from Kunti Devi about the bewildering nature of the Lord's pastimes. Sridhar Swami comments on this verse. Te ajasya janma. Although you are unborn, you have a birth. And akartuhu karma. Although you are inactive, you have activities. Tiryaksu varahadi rupena. Among the horizontals, animals are called horizontal because their bodies are horizontal. They don't walk upright, they walk horizontally. We don't remember this, or maybe we haven't been animals yet, but all of us were in a state at one point in time where we had feet and hooves, but no hands. That's pretty frustrating. And mouths they have as well, like cows. So Tiryaksu Varahadi Rupena, the Lord appears even as apparently as an animal. Varaha, not only an animal, but a pig of all animals. That's pretty gross. At least those who live in or who have lived in Indian villages, you know what is the nature of not actually pigs, but boars. Boars are even worse because they're wild pigs. So they're very, very crude animals, and yet the Lord appears in this form. Who can understand this? Narishu Ramadi Rupena. Sridhar Swami goes on to say, amongst the men, the Lord appears in forms such as Ramchandra. Srila Prabhupada has mentioned all of this in his purport. He doesn't miss anything, or rather, I should say, we don't miss anything. if we hear Srila Prabhupada's purports. But just out of respect for Sridhar Swami, we should repeat, Rishisu Vamanadi Rupena. The Lord appears among the Rishis as Vamana and others. Vamana. Vamana Dev was, after all, he was a Rishi, you can say, dwarf, Brahmana, boy. And there are other Rishis as well, who are some of the other, Naranarayana Rishi is one of the incarnations. Narad Muni, also empowered incarnation. So the Lord appears in these forms as well. And Yadahasu Matsyadi Rupena, among the aquatics, those who swim, Matsya and other such forms. You can maybe class Kurma as one of those forms as well, because he, after all, was in the ocean. When the Devas and the Asuras were churning the ocean to try to produce nectar, they used the transcendental body of the Lord as a base for their churning. Okay, so this is all that Sridhar Swami says. Jiva Goswami doesn't comment here, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has a fairly lengthy commentary. He says, understanding the conclusions about your partiality or impartiality, your action or lack of action, your birth or lack of birth, one can relish your pastimes. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has elevated this whole discussion beyond just philosophy and into the realm of theology. And in particular, we're not just talking about Gyan or even Divya Gyan anymore. Now we're talking about something very, very elevated, and that is Rasasvadanam. We know from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Raso Vaisa Laptvanandi Bhavati. All of us are pleasure anandamayo bhyasat, Vyasadeva says in his Brahma Sutra. We are all by nature seeking after happiness at every step. We do nothing in this world other than try to counteract misery in order to enjoy happiness. This is our entire concern, 24/7, even when we sleep, actually. If you're attacked by a tiger in your dream, you're still trying to defend yourself because that nature cannot be erased. That is what we are. We are pleasure seeking. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. Once I remember there's an airport arrival, Srila Prabhupada, when he used to come to especially in the Western countries, particularly America, all the devotees in any city that Prabhupada visited, they would all join together and all of them would go into the airport terminal. In those days, you were allowed. Nowadays, we're not allowed anymore. People say that life is getting better, but I don't know if that's true. Anyway, so all the devotees used to just flood into the terminal, hundreds of them sometimes, particularly in Los Angeles and New York and big cities like this. Hundreds of devotees, all thunderously chanting Hare Krishna Sankirtan, all at once, just to welcome his divine grace. So in this scenario, Srila Prabhupada once arrived, I forget where it was, but a reporter asked him, tell me what the purpose of life is. This was maybe a more advanced reporter, because normally they ask mundane questions like, what is that mark on your forehead? Why do you shave your heads? Are you really vegetarians? So anyway, this reporter asked Srila Prabhupada, what is the meaning? What is life meant for? What is the purpose of life? And Prabhupada answered very candidly. He said, the purpose of life is to enjoy. That kind of startled me when I first heard it. That, how can he be saying this? Because we're not supposed to enjoy in this world. We're supposed to serve the Supreme Lord in this world. But actually, Prabhupada was right. Service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is enjoyment. That really is the source of our enjoyment. And we're going to hear about this more in a few verses. We'll get to this point. But This is all the way back, as I said, in the Untitled Shruti, that the purpose of life is to enjoy bliss. And that bliss comes from service to the Supreme Lord, who is Rasa. Raso Vaisa. He is himself Rasa. So this is one thing we can see here. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells us that all this is all this bewildering contradiction and bewildering activities, they're actually only meant to give pleasure to his devotees. This is the real reason Krishna comes. Although we hear that Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya ityadi, tadatmanam srijamyaham. For what reason? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkratam. The Lord comes to kill demons, we know. But as a matter of fact, the Lord's only purpose is really to give pleasure to his devotees. And this is how he does so. He does so by doing wild things, outrageous, inconceivably wonderful things that no one else can do. No one else, even if you can find someone in this world who can jump off of a mountain that's 8 miles high and hit the ground without a parachute, unscathed, you cannot find such a person who also has a brother who goes with him and does it. For Krishna, marrying 16,000 wives and providing a separate palace for each one of them and dealing with each of them in one form as Krishna, all at the same time. Only Krishna can do these things. And Krishna also, he does these things just to give pleasure to his devotees. So this is the first point made by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He also says, you're born although you're unborn, and you perform actions although you're not the doer. You manifest your attractive nature in various forms of animals, humans, and aquatics. This is an extreme deception. Atyanta virdambanam. She uses this word. It's very strong language that doesn't quite come out in the purport or in the translation. Prabhupada, he says, this is bewildering. Yes, it's bewildering, but actually it's cheating. It's deliberately bewildering. Virdambana. Krishna's intention is to short circuit our intelligence by these amazing things that he does. So it's an extreme deception. This is, I think, maybe Bhanu Swami's translation of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Atyanta Vedambanam. It's very, very strong statement. Because it appears that you lessen your stature by accepting inferior forms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why on earth would the Supreme Lord come in the form of a boar or swim around in the ocean? It's not particularly glorious for anyone else to take these forms. When we take these forms, it's an abomination, as a matter of fact. And yet when Krishna takes these forms, he's glorified for it. So when you accepted the boar incarnation, you sniffed out the earth. We've seen pigs here in Vrindavan. That's what they do. They're sniffing through the nali and they're looking for all kinds of filth. The more fresh it is out of the toilet, and they like it more. It's inconceivable. And when the Lord comes in this form, he acts like a hog in such a convincing manner that all the atheists are bewildered and they think that he has to have become a hog. It's not possible to conclude anything else if you're using your mundane intelligence. This is the problem. Achintya khalu ye bhavana tanstarthina yojiyet. We hear from the Shastra. We should not try to use our mundane reasoning and logic and try to stuff the Supreme Lord into that procrustean bed, so to speak. Means we should recognize that you cannot fit a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit. And likewise, we cannot accommodate the completely bewildering deception of the Lord's pastimes within our own mundane logic and frame of reference and experience and even reasoning. We can't make it fit there. Therefore, when the Lord comes and sniffs out the earth from the bottom of the ocean, the devotees who are aware of this and who are aware of his transcendental identity, they just think it's wonderful. It becomes a great source of amazement and pleasure for the devotees to discuss these things. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur continues, although you're omniscient, omniscient means he knows everything, and omnipotent means he's capable of everything. You became a real bore. This is the point. As I said already, his act is so convincing that the demons cannot imagine that he's not just an ordinary bore. Therefore, we should be a little bit careful because we have the same problem, don't we? When we go into the temple, yes, we see Krishna because Krishna is there in the deity form, but we see the deity form as a marble statue. And it's very hard for us to see it otherwise because we've not yet qualified our vision. Premanjana churita bhakti vilocanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achincha gunaswarupam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The Lord is actually seen by those who have developed premanjana, whose eyes are marked with the kajal of prema. That takes some time for us. And that's why we have this bhakti yoga process. Otherwise, even if we were to go back to Godhead now, what would we see there? We would see a dusty cowherd and have a hard time believing that this is actually Krishna. This is actually God. We could never be sure. And not just fools like us, because it has to be admitted, we are fools. We really are. Even if we don't admit it, those around us, they know. That's why household life is very beneficial. A man who thinks he knows everything, if he has a wife, he very quickly learns. He doesn't know everything. She'll let him know it. So the Lord became as if a real bore, I mean to say. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur continues, he says, but seeing that form, the knowers of the truth will not laugh and say that you're simply a mortal animal, thinking that you're a jiva under the control of karma, because they know. Since you're actually without birth and material action, your pastimes with birth and action must not actually be true. This is an objection somebody may raise. But this is incompatible with the fact that the pastimes were attractive to Atmaramas like Shukdev Goswami. Why do these great acharyas, even Shankaracharya, king of the impersonalists, why do they take so much pleasure? Pranamata Govindam Paramanandam Satyam Jnanam Anantam Nityam Ityadi, we know. Shankaracharya is glorifying Govinda in so many of his prayers. Actually, he was a devotee at heart. And even Shankaracharya recognizes Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Narayana is transcendental to this mundane manifestation. What to speak of other munis like Narad Muni, Shukdev Goswami, Vyasdev, and in more recent times we have Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, we have Nimbarkacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 6 Goswamis, all the way down to the present day, so many great acharyas who gave their lives and sacrificed in ways that we can't even imagine. We know we have the example before us in recent history of Srila Prabhupada. If you read his biography, I mean, people, if we had not seen him, if we had not lived with him, we would not believe that it's possible for a human being to act in the ways that even Srila Prabhupada did, what to speak of his august predecessors. So people of this caliber, are they wasting their time worshiping pigs? Or just, are they fooling themselves that there's such a God who can actually incarnate in these convincing forms that appear to be material and are so bewildering to everyone? They're not fools. We're fools because we're thinking that this supreme, omnipotent, omniscient personality of Godhead can be stuck within this tiny, tiny framework of our own paltry intelligence. It's our problem, actually. It's just like someone with cataracts cannot see very clearly. Or worse still, when we become atheists, it's like someone who keeps his eyes shut in the daytime and therefore refuses to believe there's a sun. Owls are doing this. They only come out at night, pretty much. So the Lord himself says, Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad quotes, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. He knows the true nature of my birth and activities. These great souls, devotees, in other words. The Lord's birth and activities are factual. They're not a fiction. And this is incompatible with the statement that the Lord has no birth and no activities. So that is a contradiction. So who can know the truth about the Lord who possesses unlimited, inconceivable powers? How do we reconcile this contradiction? We've been describing how the Lord's pastimes are bewildering. And what does she say? Sridhar Swami is the one who's focusing on these contradictions, that you're unborn, but you take birth, and you're inactive, but you have activities. And Prabhupada's purport also mentions that these activities are not only bewildering, but in fact, they are contradictory. So how do we reconcile this apparently contradictory nature of the Lord's activities? We have to accept the Achintya Shakti of the Lord. Jiva Goswami says, unless we accept the Achintya Shakti, you cannot have any complete, mature theistic conception of God, really. Your conception of God will not be completely theistic. It will be touched by some degree of atheism, because a central aspect of the Vedic philosophy is Achintya Shakti. The Lord has inconceivable. Why inconceivable? Because our minds are too small to accommodate their power, their magnitude. Our intelligence is too paltry to understand exactly how the Lord does things. We can't even understand how a cow turns grass into milk. That is the mystic potency of the cow. They have two stomachs, maybe more than that. And as a matter of fact, we can't even understand how our own bodies are functioning. There's so many things we cannot understand. So it's not at all surprising that we can't understand how it is that the Lord's activities can manifest these contradictions that are not actually contradictory. That is an inconceivable thing. So the inconceivable Shakti of the Lord is something that is also emphasized in Srila Prabhupada's purport. So these are some of the comments that we have on this verse. Srimati Kunti Devi, she goes on in the same chapter, and she says, Kechid ahur ajam jatam. This is the point we're discussing, that some people say that the Lord, although he's aja, he's jata. He's unborn, but he's born. Punya shlokasya kirtaye yadoho priyasyanavaye malayasyeva chandanam. Other people say that the Lord appears in this world for the purpose of pleasing Yadu Maharaj, one of his great devotees, King Yadu. And he appears in that dynasty, the Yadavas, just as the sandalwood appears in Malaya. Sandalwood can grow anywhere where the climate is appropriate, but it's particularly known that it's growing in this Malaya province. Therefore, Malayasyeva Chandanam. This is the comparison she gives. So there are different opinions about the Lord, Prabhupada says in his own purport. Some people are, basically two of them are given here. Some people say that the Lord appears to glorify pious King Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, when in battle, he stays strong. He doesn't shrink away from a battle. Yudhe chapya palayanam. This is the quality Krishna lists as of a kshatriya in Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, he's properly named. All the kshatriyas, they tend to have names that are very martial in this way. Pratap Rudra, blazing fury, or Man Singh, proud lion, or as we said, Yudhishthira, firm in battle. So Yudhishthira was not only firm in battle, he was also very firm in dharma. And for that reason, Krishna wanted to establish him as the king of the world. We know, we've said already from chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, dharma samsthapanarthaya. That's one of the reasons that the Lord appears in this world, dharma samsthapana. But who's going to establish this dharma within the world? Except for the Lord's devotees, those who are dharmic. Therefore, the whole battle of Kurukshetra, the whole drama of the Mahabharata was all arranged by Krishna only to effect this, only to bring about dharma in this world, only to install Yudhishthira as the king, because Yudhishthira was the pious king. And therefore, this is the reason that she's giving here. Some say it's true. It's very true. This is why the Lord came. Because when there's a pious king ruling over the world, people are happy. Because pious king means he ensures that everybody is doing his own duty. First of all, you have to convince people in the modern world that they have a duty. People are so bewildered and atheistic and so selfish and so fallen that they don't even have the conception that life is actually meant for a purpose higher than the pigs who eat stool. They don't even have that conception. First of all, that idea has to be planted into their minds. And then they have to be enlightened about the fact that everybody has his own duty, swadharma. According to the individual nature and the conditioning, a certain prescribed set of duties will elevate you. And paraswabhava, what is that? Twice in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says,
Swadharmo nigunam shreya. You're thinking. Swadharmo nigunam shreya, paradharma bhayavala. That is one. Is that one?
Yeah, that's right. He says, you should not try to do somebody else's duty, because that will bring about sin. It's actually sinful reactions, sinful thing to do someone else's duty. You have to do your own duty. And when everyone does their own duty, and when the king ensures that everyone is doing their own duty, then people become happy as much as is possible. That you're always going to get in this world birth, death, old age, and disease. It's never entirely comfortable, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it is right now. In 2022, my God, everybody knows very clearly there's something wrong here, very seriously wrong. And it's because of the lack of dharma, and particularly the lack of dharmic leaders. Now the leaders' only purpose is to exploit their citizens by keeping them ignorant. And this is what they do. Deliberately, they keep people down in ignorance. They don't want them to understand anything about what to speak of mundane dharma, Bhagavat dharma in particular. They don't want people to know this. We're so fortunate if we live in a circumstance where we can openly and freely practice Krishna consciousness. Do not ever take it for granted, because it's not always granted to everyone. We may not remember when we were praying hard to take birth so that we could practice Krishna consciousness as a human being. But when we were in the womb for so many months in such an uncomfortable situation, we were praying hard for this opportunity. And even when they take a human birth, there are many in this world who are living in such a demoniac society, they're not allowed to worship God. Go to North Korea and see how long you last if you try to glorify anybody except for the leader of that nation. It won't work. And in other places, if you belong to the wrong religion, they will kill you without a second thought. And I mean, it's a great privilege to be able to practice Krishna consciousness to whatever degree we can. But the degree to which we can practice Krishna consciousness is commensurate to the degree that we have a pious ruler who is encouraging this practice. It's very, very important. So Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that when the ruler is impious, people are unhappy. In the age of Kali, in most cases, rulers are impious, and therefore the citizens are also continuously unhappy, continuously. No matter what they do, every 4 years in the United States, they elect a new president. They're already complaining about this one now, just like they were complaining about the last one. And now in the UK, they're looking for a new one as well. And I mean, nobody's ever happy in this world because there's only one way to be happy, and that is through dharma. Visheshkar Bhagavat dharma. So, many points that Prabhupada raises in his purport to this verse. One, he says that in democracy, so-called, I mean, there's no real democracy if you haven't noticed, but ideally, in a democracy, the citizens should elect their leader, and that leader should represent the citizens. But it doesn't happen really like that. But still, in so-called representative democracy, the impious citizens themselves are the ones to blame for electing an impious ruler. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada always used to emphasize direct preaching to the masses of Krishna consciousness, ground level, grassroots approach. Although in previous yugas, the sages and the Vaishnavas, they would approach pious kings and try to preach to them. In many cases, they were successful. That happened with Birdhambir in West Bengal about 500 years ago. He became a devotee by the preaching of one of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers. And it can happen today also. Here in India, it's actually happening to a large degree. The rulers in India are very favorable to Krishna consciousness and ISKCON. But in less pious countries, it's not so easy because the rulers are elected from impious people, and so they're going to naturally be the wrong rulers. Therefore, Prabhupada always encouraged the process of direct preaching, especially through 3 things: book distribution, especially Harinam Sankirtana, and prasadam distribution. All 3 of these is equally transcendental. All 3 of them are powerful, very powerful. So, citizens can be pious when they have a proper Krishna conscious king. And in modern day and age, in most societies of the world, that's only going to happen when we have critical mass of groundswell, support of the people in general who are intelligent and educated enough that they can elect a pious ruler. It's an important objective of ISKCON, to create that somehow or other. So that's one thing Kunti mentions here. Next thing is Yadu Maharaj. Prabhupada points out the Lord is known as Yadava, Yadunandan, Yaduvira, etc. So many Yadunath, Yadupati, so many names. And he gives the same explanation, Malayasyeva Chandanam. And then Prabhupada explains very nicely at the end, the Lord is ever unborn, just like the sun is unborn. but the sun appears to be born on the eastern horizon. Anybody can understand this simple analogy. It's a hallmark of Srila Prabhupada's preaching that he takes these abstruse philosophical or theological principles and he translates them into pedestrian language in simple terms that anyone can immediately understand. Anuvada. So Srila Prabhupada is doing it again here. As the sun rises in the eastern horizon, that doesn't make it an eastern sun. And in fact, the sun is also not even born, although it appears to come out of the ocean. Let's say if we live in the East Coast, it seems as if the sun is coming out of the ocean, but it's not so. The sun is already there, just coming over. So the Lord is also no one's son, but he's the father of all living beings. Kunti Maharani continues in text 33. She says, Apare, other people, she's giving more opinions here. Apare vasudevasya devakyam yachito abhyagat. Ajastvamasya kshemaya vathaya chasuradvisham. Very nice. Others say that since both Vasudeva and Devaki prayed for you, you've taken your birth as their son. Undoubtedly you're unborn, and yet you take your birth for their welfare and to kill those who are envious of the demigods. Kshemaya vadhaya cha suradvisham. So tvamasya kshemaya and suradvisham vadhaya cha. For your welfare, Devaki, you come for Devaki and Vasudev's welfare, and you come to annihilate those persons who are envious of such devotees, envious of the demigods. 7th canto of Bhagavatam, we hear, any society in which the Lord and the cows and the Brahmins and the devotees and the Vedas, etc., are all disrespected, that civilization will not last. You should know this very clearly. Just study history if you don't believe it. There is no empire that has lasted for much longer than 200 or 300 years. There are some exceptions. The Romans lasted for a while. The Greeks lasted for a long time. So, but the general principle is that these big empires that everybody is so impressed with, they don't last for very long. Where I come from in America, you can see it's pretty much on the way out. I think there's not much question left about that. Otherwise, how can they say things like make America great again or change you can believe in? So 5,000 years ago, Vasudeva and Devaki, we know the story. We've heard it even a few days ago. I'm sure everyone here has heard it, that Kamsa was persecuting them. Innocent devotees. They didn't hurt Kamsa. They were his relatives. And yet Kamsa was ready to kill his sister. So cruel he was that even though the 8th child was apparently a girl, and even though his own sister piteously implored him to please, what can she do to you? She's a little girl. Still, in front of his own sister, he threw her upon the stone floor. How can you imagine such a thing? What drove Kamsa to act in this way? I will tell you, it's the same thing that drives us to do things that we know are wrong. Arjuna asks this question in Bhagavad Gita. What is it that impels us to do these things? Maybe we're not as bad as Kamsa, but we all do the wrong things that deliberately we do things that we know are wrong. Why? What does Krishna say? Kama esha, krodha esha, rajogana samudbhava. Only lust. And therefore lust has to be conquered, just as the demons are conquered. And Krishna comes to conquer them. And when we embrace Krishna consciousness, especially when we worship Krishna in the form of his holy name by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then from within our hearts, all this black stuff is annihilated by the Lord. Because he's omnipotent, we've already heard. And he's omniscient, he knows where we're really at, even if we can fool others. Krishna knows. So, very nicely, it's been stated in the Bhagavatam. Pungsam kalikritan doshan dravya deshatma sambhavan sarvan hariti chittastho bhagavan purushottamaha. That means that Bhagavan Purushottama, situated within the heart of everyone, he will clear up all the ugly anarthas that are sitting within our hearts, haunting us like ghosts in the form of desires for liberation or desires for fruitive activity. Also many anarthas we have. Chiefly, Prabhupada always used to emphasize 4 anarthas in the modern age: sinful activities, illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, gambling. And within the category of gambling, we should note, Srila Prabhupada also included rampant speculation. A big deal. People, they don't know things, but they guess too much. That's also gambling. So these are anarthas. There's so many other anarthas. Lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, illusion. These are the 6 sons of Devaki. They took birth to be annihilated only because they represented these anarthas. Shatari, when we go to the temple, the Pujari puts the Shatari upon our head. 6 enemies. They're defeated by the lotus feet of the Lord. And in Kali Yuga, we don't see those lotus feet as much as we hear those lotus feet in the form of his holy name, particularly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So Vasudeva and Devaki, they were imprisoned by Kamsa, and they prayed very hard. They prayed very hard. What were they praying for? Please, the prediction was that the 8th son will come. And when the 8th son finally appeared to them, how did he appear? In 4-handed, not iron form. Who has a baby with 4 hands? Mothers worry. They count all their fingers and toes to make sure there's no problem. But this baby, and he was born fully as an adult. That's another inconceivable thing about the Lord's pastimes. It never happens like this. It just doesn't happen. Mostly babies are crying when they're born. This baby is smiling very peacefully. Not a baby, actually. He's in full Vishnu regalia, shining. And he told them, I've appeared in this form just to reassure you, yes, it's me. I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because Vasudeva and Devaki had some modified Vatsalya Bhava, they were still afraid. Devaki still prayed that the Lord would become a small human baby, so that she was thinking somehow or other I can keep him, hide him somewhere. She was thinking like this. Even though all of her other sons were killed by Kamsa, she was, hope springs eternal, as they say, out of love. She was hoping against hope. We all have to hope against hope, isn't it? We have no hope, but we can hope against hope. And if we chant with that attitude, then we will become Krishna conscious. We will. It is guaranteed, not by me, but by Srila Prabhupada, by all of the acharyas, by Krishna himself. It's guaranteed. We should have that faith. So they prayed. And the Lord, he not only took birth as their son, but he became a small baby. Small toes, little fingers, smiling face, lotus eyes, curly bal, that not quite baby hair. And in this form, very convincingly, just as convincingly as when he takes birth as a boar, 2 seconds earlier, they saw him as Mahanarayana, Vaikuntha, standing before them, shining. And now he's become this convincing little baby, but very beautiful baby. Dark blue, like the rumbling clouds that they were hearing outside of the prison. It's described when Krishna was born. Very pleasing thunder, very soft rain was going on. And when the Lord became this baby, he had instructed Vasudeva, you have to take me across the river to Gokula. Yashoda has just given birth to a girl. You bring her back here, you leave me there. And he has to do this. How am I going to get out of the prison? How am I going to, anybody sees me, how am I going to cross the river during the rain? Oh, so many problems are there. We see the problems because we're absorbed in external things. But when you see God, when God is giving you an instruction and you know it's God giving you an instruction, in other words, when the faith is there, then it can be done. Mukam kuroti vachanam pangum langhayate gurum yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Ramananda Madhavam. So how did it happen? No explaining this. It happens by divine grace. When I first joined the Hare Krishna temple, I had the address of the temple that I was going to. And it was in another city. I went to another city somehow or other. I found out how to do that, even though I was only 15. I took a bus to another city alone, and I ended up downtown bus station. And I've got an address, no idea where in the city it was. But I just started walking, and eventually I saw the street, First Avenue. And I knew that the temple was on that street. So I just walked for several miles, I think, until eventually I arrived at the temple. Krishna guided. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just knew it had to be done. In this way, Vasudeva took the boy in a basket, just ordinary straw basket, and all the guards fell asleep by Krishna's arrangement, and the locks mysteriously opened by Krishna's arrangement. He just walked out, nobody saw him. Ananta Shesh became a cover over the child. He came to the raging Yamuna, and Yamuna just parted, and he walked across. How can such things happen? It's inconceivable. And then he got into the other side, Gokula, and he crept into his best friend's house, Nanda, choop chop, like a burglar. And he went to Yashoda's bedroom where she had just given birth. She was asleep. Such a compromised position he was in. If somebody came, what would happen? How would he explain? He's kidnapping his best friend's child. And he left Krishna there. He took the girl child, who was Yogamaya, in fact, and he returned to Mathura. When he got to Mathura, he crossed the river again with the girl, and he went, the gates opened again, the guards asleep again, everything she put back the way it was, and then everybody woke up. And Devaki, just like Yashoda, couldn't understand what's going on. Yashoda thought she gave birth to a girl, but she wasn't quite sure because when she woke up, it was a boy there. And Devaki also, she thought that the 8th child is supposed to kill Kamsa, but the girl is here. She knew that the Lord had a plan. So anyway, the rest we know is history. This is how the Lord's pastimes are going on. There's so much more we can say, but we've run out of time. There were 3 births. Krishna narrated to Vasudeva and Devaki. This was not their first dance. You don't get to have Krishna as your child when you're at entry level Krishna consciousness. Thousands of years, 12,000 celestial years, demigod years, not human years. That's a long time. They were engaged in austerities. And before that, they worshiped the Lord in his Vamana form. And before that, they worshiped the Lord as Krishna Garbha. These are his nitya siddhas, nitya parishads. And therefore this verse says that you've taken birth just to please these devotees. So, as I said, there are many more verses we can discuss just from this passage, because she continues at some length, explaining all the different ways in which people look at how the Lord takes birth, how this Janmashtami comes about, why, how, all the questions are answered, or at least are raised. But the answer she gives, very briefly, I'll finish now. She says that Shrinvanti Gayanti Grananti Abhikshnashah Smaranti Nandanti Tavehitam Janaha Taeva Pashyantya Chirena Tavakum Bhavat Pravaho Paramam Padambajam. O Krishna, those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities, or even take pleasure in others doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. So this is the actual reason that the Lord comes. He comes just to benefit us with this process of hearing and chanting, as we mentioned already, especially chanting. But you cannot really separate them, because there's no point in chanting without hearing. You don't even know what to chant unless you've heard it. And so they go together. But chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra and following this process of bhakti yoga and the right association, especially because association is everything. This is how we advance, and this is how we come to the stage of devotional service, and devotional service is how we understand the mystery of Krishna's appearance. So I have to stop here, but maybe if somebody has any questions, we can take just one or two questions.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful elucidation and bringing into the actual practical examples how it applies in our lives. Sachi Mata has a question. I have also a question on the where we see in Madhya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu is describing the opulence, sweetness of Lord Krishna. It is described at Vrindavan in fraction of moments. Lord created material and spiritual worlds along with its predominating deities. Nowhere see this kind of opulence anywhere else except in Vrindavan. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes. So you can give some of your reflections. Sachi Mata has a question. Go ahead, Sachi Mata.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Very nice class, different perspectives on Krishna Janmashtami. I had a question. You mentioned something, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word or not. You were talking about the anarthas, and you said rampant speculation, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, could you just elaborate on that a little, because I've not heard about that? Yeah,
well, speculation is a very general term, even in English. But we have, and Prabhupada says that gambling includes speculation. As a matter of fact, some people may be a little uncomfortable to hear, but Prabhupada didn't even really like certain high-risk investment strategies because he considered it to be gambling. And really it is. We don't know what's going to happen. And when we're gambling with something important, it's not so good. It's good to do things that are sure and pakka. We don't want to take any risks unnecessarily. And this applies certainly in the realm of philosophy. As I mentioned already, it applies even in our practical affairs, even in our financial affairs, and even in our dealings with other persons and personal interactions. We tend to speculate on what's going on in another person's mind, but we don't know it. We can't know these things. So speculation is an extremely broad and inclusive, comprehensive category that we have to watch out for. So that's why I call it rampant speculation, because in most cases, we don't even realize how much it's operating within our character until after some years in Krishna consciousness. Then we finally begins to dawn on us that wait a minute, this applies to me actually. So we have to be careful about that. In many respects, this fourth regulative principle of no gambling, it's actually the hardest one to follow. If you understand this term in the way that Prabhupada explains it throughout his books. Is that helpful?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. Very helpful, thank you. Very good.
Okay, so you had a question, Krishnananda. Not sure I understood what your question is.
You can share some reflections on that point. Speaking about the verse from Madhya Leela, chapter, I forget, I think 21 chapter, verse number 17. Prakruta aprakruta srishti kaila ekakshane asesha vaikunta ajananda swasva nathasane. At Vrindavana, Lord immediately created all material and spiritual planets in one moment. Indeed, all of them were created with their predominating deities.
Yes. What is the reference again? I'll look it up.
But how Lord's opulence and sweetness in terms of the bewilderment.
Yeah, what is the verse number you're talking about?
Verse number 21, chapter number 21, Madhya Leela Chaitanya Charitamrita, verse number 17.
Okay.
That whole chapter is the Mahaprabhu explaining opulence and sweetness of Krishna.
Yeah. Prakrita srishti kaila ekakshane ashesha vaikunta janda swasvanathas shange. So at Vrindavan, the Lord immediately created all spiritual and material planets in one moment. Indeed, all of them were created with the predominating deities. I haven't reviewed the entire passage here, so I'm a little uncomfortable to comment on it. But it seems he's talking about this Brahma Vimohan Leela, according to Prabhupada's purport in the following couplet, that the Lord actually did manifest everything before Brahmaji, just to show him what was his capacity, because Brahma had some doubts about that. But actually, the fact is that he's done this many times in Vrindavan, and he does it quite a bit. Once, just for kicks, the Lord manifested his Varaha Rupa for all the gopis, just to impress them, just to make an impression on the young girls. Krishna was, because he just basically is showing off. So he shows them this Varaha Rupa. Now, look who I am. So he can do things like this. He's omnipotent. And we know that to bewilder Yashoda also, he did this. Yashoda is looking in his mouth because the kids are saying that he's eaten some dirt. And she looks in there and she almost falls into the black hole of the cosmic manifestation. And just, I mean, this is the bewildering nature. Devaki also, when Krishna first appeared to her and her husband in the prison of Kamsa, she was so confused. She said, this whole cosmic manifestation is coming out of the lotus that is born from your navel, Padmanabha Swami. Those who have been to Trivandrum, Ananta Shayana. Big Mahavishnu, and on top of this lotus, Brahma comes, and Brahma creates these 14 worlds, and all these worlds are coming out of your abdomen, but you're coming out of my abdomen. She said, I can't understand this. Tadatyanta Virambanam, just like Kunti Rani. So this is the bewildering nature of the Lord's Leelas. And in Vrindavan, it's not like the Lord doesn't show his Aishwarya. He does. But he does it in such a way that it only nourishes his Madhurya. And outside of Vrindavan, he may have some other purpose to fulfill in displaying his Aishwarya. But in Vrindavan, its exclusive purpose is always just to tickle his devotees with a manifestation of his inconceivable potency. They don't even, by the agency of Yoga Maya, they don't even believe that he's God, although there are rumors to that effect. but they're not sure about it, at least. Either they're not sure or they are sure that he's not God. They have no idea of his actual identity, and yet they see him do these things that nobody else can do, and they just think it's so cool that they have no other interest. Even when Narayan appears to the gopis, all they can do is fold their hands to be respectful out of proper, appropriate behavior. But their real interest is to find out, maybe, since you're omniscient, maybe can you tell us where Krishna went? This is their entire absorption. Their only thought and their only action and their only thing in their minds actually is how to please Krishna and how wonderful Krishna is. They're constantly, it's like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. He's giving us only a hint in the Bhagavad Gita. But in his 4 seed verses of the Bhagavad Gita, what does he say? Mad chitta mad gata prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayantaschama nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. We may have explained this here before, I don't remember, but these are just the activities of the spiritual world only. That's all that Krishna consciousness entails. We're only being asked to live the way that the residents of Brajadham live. And how do they live? Their thoughts are completely absorbed in Krishna. Madchitta, Madgata Prana. Their lives cannot remain without Krishna. Their lives are gone to Krishna. Or without Krishna, their lives are gone. Either way you want to look at it. And Bodhayanta Parasparam, they're enlightening or inquiring from one another. How do I distribute more books? This is Prabhupada says in the 10th canto purport, this is samadhi. For us, this is samadhi. For them, they have their own purposes. But they're inquiring from one another and they're enlightening one another. If you want to please Krishna, here's what you do. It's like, Krishna tava punya hobe bhai. Ei punya koribe hobe Radharani khushi hobe. Srila Prabhupada wrote. That's also bodhayanta parasparam. They are enlightening one another how to please Krishna. And bodhayanta parasparam. Kathayantaschama nityam. They're so in love with Krishna, they can only talk of him, and they talk of him always. They don't stop. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains what this means. 2 things. Tushyanti charamanti cha. Is that redundant? No. In Sanskrit, we're not allowed to say the same thing twice in one vakya because it's a literary flow. So tushyanti charamanti cha, it seems as if it's more or less the same. You're pleased or you're pleasing, being pleased. But it's not like that. He says tushyanti cha means in the stage of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, when we're neophytes, when we're not yet mature in Krishna consciousness, tushyanti, we are satisfied that we have the opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness, as we were saying earlier. It's such a great portion. They're grateful, in other words. They take satisfaction in the gratitude of this opportunity to cultivate Krishna consciousness. And they look forward to the day that we can actually relish it. That's Ramanticha. When they become siddhas and actually go back to Godhead, then Ramanticha. Then they can actually enjoy the nectar of pure devotional service. For us, we have only to look forward to that in anticipation. But in the spiritual world, Ramanticha, they're actually enjoying that ideal because it's what they are. When we remove all the dross, as we were saying, Sarvan Hariti Chittasto, Bhagavan, Purushottama, when Bhagavan from within the heart removes all things that are extraneous and unnecessary and injurious, in fact, all the anarthas, in other words, then what's left? Only the self is shining in its pristine glory, in its constitutional identity, ontological position, Siddhadeha. we become residents of the spiritual world again. In that state, we can enjoy, but we can look forward to it now. Therefore, tushyanti cha, ramanti cha, it's not redundant. But the point is that in the spiritual world, this is how the devotees are. And even in Gokula Vrindavan, this is how the devotees who are mature, they're worshiping like this. I hope that's okay.
Thank you so much. It's actually, that's why I asked you. Your brilliant explanation, I'm sure. So that's why I had asked you. You can only explain this way.
One thing I did mention, Sarvan Harati. From within the heart, the Lord removes all the anarthas. What kind of anarthas are they? There are three. Dravya Sambhava Dosha, and Desha Sambhava Dosha, and Atma Sambhava Dosha. These three are specifically mentioned. This verse is from the 11th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Dravya Sambhava Dosha, the flaws that are originating from the fact that you're working with faulty materials, or you don't have enough materials, maybe. Just like in this world, the devotee, Hare Krishna devotees are always asking, can you donate? Money is always required. So it may seem to be a flaw, but we need things in this world, and we need certain things in this world, and we may not have those things in this world. And this is the world of necessity. So sometimes, when things are not proper and nothing is really pure in this Kali Yuga, you cannot even buy a cotton dhoti anymore, I'm sorry to say, at least not in Vrindavan, maybe in Bangladesh. I went to Bangladesh and they gave me cotton gamsha, lungi actually. It's the first time I've seen such a thing in 20 years. So, Dravya Sambhava Dosha, that's one thing. And then Desha Sambhava Dosha, we've described. If you're living in, well, now even North America is also a very rough place. You have to use only the wrong pronouns and somebody's ready to kill you. So, Desha Sambhava Dosha. So sometimes the environment is not so user-friendly for Krishna consciousness. And then finally, the worst one is what we brought into this situation along with us in our subtle body, Atma Sambhava Dosha. Things that we've been carrying around for God only knows how many eons. All the anarthas that we mentioned, particularly those 6. All these things Krishna can eliminate in one stroke. It's like Srila Prabhupada wrote to one devotee. You say you have so many obstacles, but with one kick, I can kick out all of your obstacles. So Krishna can do like this. If he sees, if he's pleased that he's seriously chanting, or she's really listening now. This is serious business. When he sees that, then just like that, everything gone. In exactly the same way that he can dispatch demons in his leelas. He will dispatch all of our anarthas. Just wanted to mention those 3 categories. All right, I guess we better stop now because I'm kind of just rambling at this point.
Very grateful for your association and time, valuable temple. Thank you.
Thank you for your appreciation, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about Krishna consciousness and Sri Krishna Janmashtami.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Radhe Radhe.
We'll have quick announcements. So today evening we have His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu will be speaking. Sunday Fest is on. Before that, Krishna dress competition is starting at 5 o'clock. Please invite your friends and others, small kids who can participate in this Krishna dress competition 5 to 6. If you have questions, please talk to Hari Kishore Prabhu and Chakori Mataji. Then followed by Gaura Arti, and then drama also, and the class. So continued celebrations of Sri Krishna Janmashtami. Madhupad Prabhu had sent a message thanking all the volunteers, all the devotees, tirelessly worked this whole week to celebrate this festival. We have upcoming festivals, starting with Monday is Ekadasi, fasting from grains and beans. Another Ekadasi, I think. And next, I think September 3rd, Saturday, I think, Radhastami, upcoming festival, along with Bhadra Purnima, which is in the same month. This is coming up, which means we all should, as we heard from His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu, one of the item out of 3 of Srila Prabhupada's main things is book distribution. Let us try to see what we can do in that Bhadra Purnima aspect, how we can distribute more books and devotees. So, and also this month end, 31st, I think, Srimati Sita Thakurani Advaita Acharya's concert appearance day is there. In September 1st week also, I think Bhakti Vinod Thakur's appearance day is coming up. Please plan. If we don't plan in our life, we will not be able to remember the Supreme Lord. That's how it works. And we'll be occupied with so many things. We won't be able to celebrate. We won't be able to do service. So that's why please plan ahead for all these upcoming festivals so that we can properly engage ourselves, our mind, intelligence, and our resources, wealth, and family in the service of the Srila Prabhupada and Supreme Lord. So those are the quick announcements. Madhupad Prabhu, anything else?
Prabhuji, also tomorrow is Gopal Krishna Maharaj's Vyas Puja, so everybody is invited for that. It starts at 6:30 in the evening, so please come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all again for your tireless services for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord and His pure devotee on their appearance, their celebration. So, Krishna Prabhu covered everything. Just in the evening after Gaur Aarti is a class by His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, followed by drama presented by ISKCON Youth, CNJ Youth. So, stay tuned. Extended Janmashtami celebration ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Also, thank you very much to the management. It was a beautiful festival. Thank you very much for arranging and organizing everything. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hari Bol. Hare
See you all in the
Krishna.
evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Dandu Radhe Radhe.
Kripa Sindhu Vaya Vacha
Vacha
Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Vaishnavendra.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Radhe Radhe.
Hare Krishna.